I'm not as think as I smart I am. I'm not as think as I smart I am. I'm not as think as I thought I might be, for that's clear anybody to see. I'm not as think as I smart I am. I'm not as think as I smart
Hi,
I am.
this is The Ordinary Guy, and you're listening to the 17th episode of the Brains Matter podcast. Today is a very, very hot 17th of February 2007. On today's show, we hear about Machu Picchu, the brain teaser, James Maxwell, Pin of the Week, and I'll bring you some of the latest news in the world of knowledge. If you've ever been to Peru in South America, you would have heard of Machu Picchu. It's located in the Andes Mountains, about 70 kilometers northwest of Cuzco. It's located on a ridge between a block of highland and next to the Urubamba River. The area near Machu Picchu is covered with bush, and what makes it special is the fact that it's also surrounded by pre-Columbian terraces. It's located at an elevation of 2,350 meters, and the cliff of Machu Picchu has a sheer drop of 600 meters to the Urubamba River. Machu Picchu actually means Manly Peak, and if you look at the photos of Machu Picchu, you can see why. The views are spectacular. It's believed that it was a royal estate, a holiday house in a way, and a religious retreat. It's also called the Lost City of the Incas. Machu Picchu was forgotten by the outside world, but then rediscovered in 1911 by the archaeologist Hiram Bingham. In 1983, it became a World Heritage Site and is one of the most popular tourist destinations in Peru. So who built Machu Picchu? It was built by an Incan ruler by the name of Pachacuti Inca Yupanqui, somewhere between the years 1460 and 1470, so around 550 years ago. It has around 200 buildings. Most of them were buildings designed to be lived in, but you'll also find temples, storage buildings, and other public places, and the masonry is polygonal, which is typical of the late Inca period. Some of the masonry blocks have anything up to 30 corners, but despite what you'd think, they're not just thrown together in the hope that the walls will remain standing. The engineering effort that went into building these Inca buildings was very advanced, and the joints are very tight, so obviously a lot of thought would have gone into them and how they would fit together to provide these strong walls. The site isn't that big, only about 5 square miles, but it was a very important site. The majority of residents were thought to have been women, children, and Incan priests. It's thought that only about 750 people lived there. Some have suggested that other than being a ceremonial place or a royal retreat, that it was also an astronomical observatory. The Intihuatana stone, which means hitching post of the sun, actually shows the date precisely of the two equinoxes, and on midday on the 21st of March and 21st of September, the sun stands directly above the pillar, resulting in no shadow at all. These moments were when the Incas held ceremonies which they symbolically tied the sun to the rock to try and stop its movement in the sky. Very advanced mathematics and astronomy for the time. Machu Picchu. It's a fascinating place and absolutely beautiful. If you can't go and visit there someday, go ahead and read up about it. And now it's time for the brain teaser. I'm going to delve into a bit of fiction for today's brain teaser. The question for today is, what is Isaac Asimov's 3 laws of robotics? The answer to that is coming up later in the show. Today's pin of the week goes to Diego from Melbourne in Australia. Thanks for adding to the Frapper map, Diego. If you'd like to get involved, then just add to the Frapper map, which is linked from the Brains Matter website. Anyone who studied electromagnetics and physics would know Maxwell's equations. Maxwell gave the world his equations in 1864, and they stated the fundamentals of electricity and magnetism. These equations form the basis of most of the relationships within the field of electricity and magnetism, and if it wasn't for this knowledge, today we wouldn't have essential things like colour televisions or mobile phones. Well, I know some people for who these items are essential. James Clerk Maxwell was born 175 years ago. In 2006, it was actually called Maxwell Year in his honour. He was one of the first to try and unify nature's forces, and this was shown through his equations. They unified the forces of electricity, magnetism, and light, which had never been done before. In 1865, he wrote to his cousin Charles and said, "I have also a paper afloat containing an electromagnetic theory of light, which, till I am convinced to the contrary, I hold to be great guns." Turns out he was right. Nobody had seriously considered this prior to Maxwell, and even today, physicists are trying to find out how to unify all of nature's forces, and that's the primary purpose of string theory, superstring theory, and M-theory. For some reason, Maxwell isn't thought of in the same regard as others like Einstein and Newton. There's a story that goes along the lines of this. When Einstein visited Cambridge in the 1920s, someone remarked to him, "You've done great things, but you stand on Newton's shoulders." Einstein replied saying, "No, I stand on Maxwell's shoulders." That's how well regarded he was. He also introduced mathematical methods in the Maxwell-Boltzmann statistics and quantum mechanical Fermi, Dirac and Bose-Einstein statistics, which governs photons and electrons. He was one of the first to discuss the butterfly effect, which is where one small change in variables for an initial condition can dramatically change the outcome of that system and is the basis for chaos theory. It's also the basis of the name of a rock band, but I won't go into that. Maxwell's article entitled Ether in the Encyclopaedia Britannica inspired Albert Michelson to invent the interferometer, which was used in 1887 by Edward Morley to discover that the speed of light is indeed the same in all directions. Maxwell died young, from cancer, on the 5th of November 1879, aged 48. There are those who believe that if he had lived a normal lifespan, it wouldn't be Einstein who everyone would remember as the person who came up with the idea of relativity, but Maxwell. Maxwell actually coined the phrase relativity back in 1877, and he discovered that electromagnetic induction differed depending on if a magnet approaches a wire loop compared to if a wire loop approaches a magnet. He wrote these asymmetries that do not appear to be inherent in the phenomena, and it was this that formed the basis of Einstein's work on special relativity. So perhaps he would have, if not for his unfortunate death, developed special relativity a decade before Einstein did. Maybe if he didn't die so young, he would have been appreciated more. Now it's time for the answer to the brain teaser. Asimov's 3 laws of robotics are: 1. A robot may not injure a human being or, through inaction, allow a human being to come to harm. 2. A robot must obey orders given to it by human beings, except where such orders would conflict with the first law. And 3. A robot must protect its own existence as long as such protection does not conflict with the first or second law. Those of you who have read Asimov's robot series, or even those who have seen the Hollywood movie I, Robot, will probably be familiar with those laws, or at least vaguely remember them. So what's been happening in the world of knowledge lately? Well, By now you'd know that Pluto is no longer classified as a planet, but a dwarf planet, or a planetoid. No doubt, you've heard the rationale why it's not considered a planet anymore. The three main criteria for the definition of a planet is that it orbits the Sun, it's large enough for its own gravity to make it spherical, so basically there's enough mass to make it round, and that it's cleared its neighbourhood of smaller objects, which Pluto fails on. Some astronomers have even said that if Pluto was closer to the Sun than where it currently is, the heat from the Sun would turn it into a comet, and it would never have been classified as a planet to start with. Another dwarf planet, 2003 EL61, could, according to Professor Mike Brown from the California Institute of Technology, eventually be affected by Neptune's gravity and turn it into a short-period comet. He claims that in about 2 million years, it would be one of the brightest comets that you could see if you lived at the time. He also said some of the former satellites of 2003 L61 could have already become comets within the inner solar system. What do you think of when you hear the term black diamond? Those who are into science fiction will probably remember the big black monolithic diamond from the sci-fi classic 2001, which originated in the centre of Jupiter. Well, I think it was Jupiter anyway. It's been a long time since I've seen the movie. It turns out that black diamonds, or carbonado diamonds, have distinct traces of nitrogen and hydrogen which don't match anything known to have been created on Earth. A group of researchers from the Florida International University, Steve Haggerty, Joseph Garay, Sandeep Rekhi, and Mark Chance, have found that the carbonado diamonds basically come from just two places, Brazil and the Central African Republic. Why is it localized to just these two places? And both of these regions don't have the geology normally associated with diamond deposits. Diamonds are also known to have a glazing on one side, which doesn't match any weather patterns on Earth, but could be explained by the radiation weather of interstellar space. The researchers have postulated that the carbonado diamonds are actually a chunk of a star that exploded well before the formation of the Earth, and the chunk was floating through space, was caught up when the Earth was being formed. So the next time someone shows you a carbonado diamond, if you're lucky enough to see one, maybe you're looking at a long distant and dead star. Dr. Ben Jones, a psychologist from the University of Aberdeen, and his team, has discovered through a series of experiments that people's opinions on the attractiveness of others isn't just determined on their own, but it's influenced by what they perceive to be the reaction of others. The researchers found that women were more attracted to a man if other women seemed to like him as well. The team tested opinions of women by giving them a test where they chose the more attractive of a pair of males and had to rate how attractive they found them. After doing this rating, they were shown a video which contained the same faces, but this time, each face was shown with a woman's face looking at them, either smiling, neutral, or looking bored. Then, the first test was repeated to see how attractive the women rated the men, and it turned out that the faces who were being smiled at were the ones that the women then found most attractive. The results for males, however, was the opposite. Dr. Jones says this could be the result of a male sense of jealousy or competition. These results were similar to the choice of mates seen in other species, but this was the first time that it's been shown to be the case in humans as well. That brings us to the end of another episode of Brains Matter for the 17th of February 2007. Be sure to drop me a line at mail@brainsmatter.com or leave a comment on this episode's show notes at www.brainsmatter.com, and make sure you let me know where you're from and how you found the podcast. Music on today's show comes courtesy of Podsafe Audio. Don't forget to vote for the podcast in Podcast Alley, and there's a transcript of the show on the website. I'll leave you with a quote from Randy Milholland. Why do we have to wait for special moments to say nice things or tell people we care about them? Very apt, considering Valentine's Day wasn't that long ago. I hope you enjoyed the show. Bye for now.
I'm not as think as I smart I am. I'm not as think as I smart I am. I'm not as think as I thought I might be, for that's clear anybody to see.